Trying to shed some pounds? We hear you. This episode might just give you help. Hey, I'm Mike.
And I'm Toying.
Welcome to another episode of 40 Plus Fit, the podcast where we unpack the science of sustainable weight loss and fitness for those over 40. Welcome to everybody. Everybody is, if you can hear, we might be a bit different today. That is because we are on location.
Yeah, I'm actually in KL at the moment, as of this recording.
So we are actually in the same room for a change. Changes the dynamic a little bit when it comes to the podcast.
Yeah, but obviously, this being a podcast, you can't see it. We haven't reached the filming stage yet, so maybe soon,
Yes,
or
yes, on the
maybe
cards.
50 episodes later. You never know.
Well, you can always let us know if the filming is what you prefer.
Yeah. What are we speaking of today, Mike?
All
I
right.
think it's calories in, calories out.
Correct, correct. We see so many fads coming on everywhere. People talking about this is the best weight loss program. That's the best weight loss program. If you want to lose weight,
Yeah.
you need to follow this, follow that. But at the end of the day, the crux of it is that it comes down to calories in, calories out.
Yes, yes. It's honestly just a very fundamental concept. And oftentimes when you go on social media, you see a lot of gurus, you see a lot of like fitness TikToks and stuff, where they end up, saying, hey, calories in, calories out doesn't work, right?
Mm.
And I think that kind of comes from the misinformed perspective, or maybe just a conflated perspective of calories in, calories out is like a diet. But actually, it's not. It's just like a rule, like a physical, scientific rule, a law of the universe kind of thing. And so I think that's really where we want to kind of help dispel some of those myths, right? Bring some clarity to this topic today.
Yeah, I think you hit it on the nail on the head there, is that there's often at times it's seen in a negative light.
Mm.
Like whenever you talk about calories in, calories out, oh, I don't want to count calories.
Yeah.
Oh, what kind of life is that? But then I could say the same to pretty much any other diet that you have out there. Is like, what kind of life is that if you do it for a sustained long period of time?
Yeah.
But I thought we'll just start off with a quick chat about, okay, what is calories in, calories out? What is the science behind it?
Yep.
And basically, it is your body burns a certain amount of calories per day,
Yes.
right? Just to sustain itself or whatever activity you partake in, and all these kinds of things. And then on top of that, you take in calories with all the things that you eat.
Yep.
All right. Now, all that we basically need to do in order to lose weight, if we really simplify things here,
Yeah.
is we need to consume less calories than what we are expending, that we are
Yeah.
burning throughout the day. And
Yeah.
that's basically what the concept of calories in, calories out is.
Yeah. I mean, there's just a net surplus or a net deficit when it comes down to it. Like maybe not even we have to consume less than we burn. We just have to make sure there is a deficit, whether it comes from doing a bit more. That means we try to burn a little bit more, or we try to eat a bit less. But of course, while it's super simple in theory, there's a lot of variables and moving parts to it, right? Because if you think about it from the eating in part, that's quite simple, right?
Yeah.
That's pretty much just whatever you put in your mouth. There's calories, and you actually eat it, consume it. So that's only pretty much one variable, which has a lot of little subsets to it. But on the output side, you have a whole bunch of different variables there to consider. So you have the first and the biggest factor to how much you're burning is actually just literally your body's makeup. So your body itself, if you were to lie in bed the whole day, it's going to burn a certain amount regardless, right? There's a certain amount of energy that your body needs to survive.
Yeah.
And that's the majority of your daily burning. It's like 60 to 70% for most people. Um, and then after that, you have some other components where it's like, okay, on top of that, now you're moving around, you're moving about, you have daily activity that then brings up that level of burning, whether it's intentional exercise or it's just you walking to the car, moving around, fidgeting, shaking your head when somebody tells you, hey, I'm trying to cut out carbs when I'm eating a diet now, I need to lose weight. All these things, all these like non-exercise related stuff, and then the exercise related stuff, they all fall under that umbrella of activity.
Mm.
Okay. And then on top of that, you also have this other aspect called the thermic effect of food. And the thermic effect of food kind of has an interplay and a relationship with what you eat, because there are certain things where when you eat them, your body actually yields lesser calories or gets lesser calories out of it because it needs a lot more energy just to kind of break some of those things down. So yeah, so while it can be a very simple equation, it's often not very simple when you apply it to daily life because there's all these variables. But the universal rule still applies. Like if you're not losing weight, it just means that whatever you have been burning and whatever you have been taking in have netted out in a balance on an aggregate.
Mm.
Because it's not quite like one day you eat lesser and you have a deficit, and then the next day the day itself, you suddenly see a significant change. Because if not, our bodies would not actually be very resilient if you think about it that way. That means that every little thing that changes, our body will be so disrupted from it. So it's really the consistency of like how often you sustain this deficit, over the week, over the months, and then you see the results.
And I think that would lead to another. The next point here is like when you're looking at calories, right?
Yes.
It obviously, as we're saying, is you need to create a net deficit. So what you need to do essentially is to get into calorie counting. And this is something that
Mm.
everybody seems to despise. Whenever you speak to people about, oh, I must count the calories. And I think it's like one reason for it is I'm not really a proponent that you must literally go and count calories for the rest of your life.
Yes.
But I always tell everybody, jump onto some or other app, whether it's MyFitnessPal, MacroFactor, whatever it is, for 1 month.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the reason for that is to create the awareness of actually what you're eating. Because
Exactly.
generally I find, like myself included, uh,
Myself included, really.
is you eyeball things and you're like, no, this I'm definitely eating at a loss here. I'm barely eating. I'm eating maybe 2 meals a day. But then when you go and you add up, and it comes here and it's like, okay, this one is quite dense. This one
Yeah.
has got quite a lot. Well,
Yeah.
well, actually, I'm like 1,000 calories over what I'm supposed to be
Yeah, yeah,
consuming.
yeah. It's funny because like human beings, we are so confident in our abilities, a lot of the times, but there are certain things we're just really bad at. Estimating things is really one of them, like the amount of food we're eating. And our memory is actually really bad as well. So every time we get people, and they've tested this, like there was one study they did on self-reported eating
Mhm.
and then tracking the actual intake, and they found that the highest discrepancy that they saw was, I believe, 72%. That means they were underreporting how much they ate by 72%. So that means that if they said they were eating 2,000 calories, they were actually eating closer to like 3,004. Okay, so that's a lot of extra calories you're taking in. And then they did another study with ladies. This was exclusively ladies, women, who were reporting that they were only eating 1,200 calories and they were not losing weight. So they said, okay, cool, no worries. Do the reporting in, and they took what they did, like in terms of the self-reported amounts, and they estimated it out broadly through like visual food diaries and all. So they were tasked to capture all these data in terms of pictures, in terms of quantity and sizing and all. And what they found is that on average, most of them were underestimating by 50%. That's average. That's the average. So some were higher, some were slightly lower, but all of them thought they were eating 1,200. Most of them were eating closer to 2,000 calories.
Mm.
And look, like it's easy for all these calories to sneak in because look, if you want to really be like depressed, go and measure out what a tablespoon of peanut butter looks like. Like actually weigh it out, and you realize just how depressing that is. There's a lot of foods that can be really dense. A lot of the packaged foods nowadays that we get at our convenience can be really dense in calories, and that's a great thing for like human survivability. But unfortunately, right now it becomes one of those things where now food is so easily available that we call this like the obesogenic environment, where food is easily available, people are not moving as much, and so um, you have the equation kind of going more into surplus than it is naturally either maintaining or going into a deficit. Yeah, so it's very normal now. So if you're feeling like, hey, it's such a struggle, or I have to put in a lot more effort to figure out how to maintain my weight, it's actually not really uh, uh, anything wrong with you. It is a byproduct of us getting better as a human race.
Yeah.
I do feel, like everybody's just getting more comfortable, things are just getting easier and more convenient. So don't feel bad about that. But the reality is still, this is what's happening. The science doesn't change. We just need to figure out, okay, how can we actually deal with that? And of course, we'll talk about, I think, episodes in the future where we'll talk more about some of the practical things that can be done, right? Like with habits and all of that. I think we have those planned as well.
Yeah. So I think what we're chat about here now is that when we're talking about advising people to start using calorie trackers, right,
Yes.
for the period of 1 month,
Yes.
the purpose that for me, whenever I do that, and why I do it myself as a reminder every now and then, is it helps you to determine portion control. So, like you mentioned, the the, the,
Peanut butter.
the depressing thing of the teaspoon of peanut butter is I'm very guilty of that. Like when I go and I type into my thing, okay, I had one peanut butter sandwich.
Yeah.
It's like the calorie counter is saying, okay, you had a teaspoon of peanut butter, and that was spread across
I mean, that's what they assume.
the slice of thing. But what I've practically done is maybe 2 tablespoons of peanut butter, but it's put down as a peanut butter sandwich, you know. So,
Yes. Yes.
so I'm still within my limits here. But when you start understanding that concept and you start seeing it, oh, actually, I
Yep.
can see this one added up, that one
Yep.
added up, this added up, and that's why I'm 1,000 calories over.
Yeah.
So it helps me to bring things back. And I think it's the precision nutrition, right? They focus primarily, they say portion control. You
Yeah.
look at your hand,
Yeah.
so your palm of your hand is your protein, your fist is your one portion of carbs, and then your thumb
Yeah.
is one portion of fats.
Yep. They popularized that. It was actually originally in, I think, the American Medical Journal,
Okay.
where they came up with the whole concept of using your hands to estimate things.
Mm.
But precision nutrition really took it into the mainstream. But this because it's like, I think we have a decent amount of our listeners being from like Southeast Asia, more local Asian kind of cuisines and cultures, right?
USA.
Oh wait, no. Okay. So half half USA. Okay, got it, got it. Sorry. Anyway, but if you're eating a lot more of let's say like mixed cuisines, right?
Mm.
Ethnic cuisines where the carbs, the fats, they tend to be kind of mixed together. They're not as separable as something like veggie or just like a pure potato or something. As most delicious food are. Uh, what I often get clients to do is we often get them to simplify the estimation process even further. So instead of saying, one fist size, no, sorry, I think it's one cup hand for carbs and one fist size for veggie and one thumb for fats, something like this. What we do is we just separate foods into like protein and like non-proteins.
Okay.
And then what I get people to do is just use your fist size or your palm size for things. So for fist size, you end up just using that to estimate the non-protein portions. So non-proteins can be veggies, can be fruits, can be any other dish, fried rice, regular rice, mashed potato with lots of butter, whatever it is. And you just use your fist size to estimate these items. And then for protein, you use your palm size. So it kind of simplifies the process a little bit further, takes it one step further, and then you just base your portions and your portion control over that. But I think back to our main point you mentioned is at the end of the day, why you track or why you even do it for yourself in the first place is to get a better understanding of exactly how much you're eating. Because at the end of the day, we don't know how much we're eating until we actually track it. And I get this all the time with clients where one of the first exercises that they do is they literally just take pictures of all the foods that they eat and log it into the app under the food diary. And what I do is I'll do a quick report on it for them. And when they see how much they're actually eating, you know, uh, they're just shocked because to them it's like, oh, actually I didn't think I was eating a lot.
Because I was just pecking here and pecking there.
Yeah. I had a couple biscuits here. I had a cup of coffee in the afternoon. I have a bubble tea post lunch. All these things that don't seem like a lot, they add up.
Well, the bubble tea is like more than most meals already.
I mean, it can be depending on what you select, and which shop you go to, I suppose.
Yeah, but when we're talking about that kind of portion control,
Yes.
where it's the palm, the fist, all that kind of stuff, does that take into account sources?
Yeah, so that's another thing. It doesn't quite take into account sources. So with obviously, the way I explained it, it sounds super simple, but there are a few other things that we add on to kind of make it a little bit easier to manage. So, for example, if you're eating something that's super saucy, you might add another half fist size to your portion, for example. If it's a really rich, creamy kind of sauce and the whole thing is slattered in it, it's built in, you could go up to like maybe two non-fist size portions for everyone, one actual fist size portion of the thing,
Mm.
and you will count it as two instead. So there's little tax, calorie or portion taxes that we place on these things. But the main idea here is not so much about being accurate as so much to be consistent with how you're looking at things and how you're estimating it and being super mindful. Because at the end of the day, the cool part about it is that your body does not need a very precise amount. We're not talking about like, drugs and dosages and stuff. And even then, that also has ranges, right? That's why your blood work always comes back within ranges. Your doctor says, hey, you're still within the normal range or whatever. Our body has a level of flexibility and tolerance. So we just need to be within a tighter margin, right, of accuracy and consistency rather, yeah. And then over time you get the net effects that you're looking for.
True, true. What about if we look at some limitations?
Yeah.
Like, I think it's good to preface here and say it's like when we're talking about calories in, calories out, we are speaking primarily from the perspective of weight loss, right?
Yes.
Calories in, calories out is not really this is the healthiest eating plan, but we're speaking about this is for weight loss.
Yeah.
Because sometimes when you talk to people, it's like, okay, you need to count your calories.
Yeah.
They think, oh, okay, so if I'm doing calorie counting, then that's healthy. I'm covering all my bases. But it still comes to, at the end of the day, is you're looking at what are you eating? What's making up those
Mm.
calories? So we have things like macronutrients, of course, which is,
Yeah.
as you stated earlier, your
Your carbs, your
proteins, your
proteins, your
carbs, your
fats.
fats. So you need to ensure you're getting it
By the way, we did episodes on those, so make sure you go check them out. Yeah, we did a whole series, right, on the
on
each
the
individual
foundations. Yeah.
macronutrient.
So we got those, but then you also got your micronutrients.
Yep.
And like macronutrients and your micronutrients, they can affect things like differently, hormones in men and women
Yeah,
differently.
your body's recoverability, the functional stuff that's happening in your body. And for those who are not aware, micronutrients are things like vitamins, the minerals. These are things that don't give you calories or actual usable energy, but they facilitate the a lot of the digestive processes and then the metabolic processes in the body. So like let's say nervous system, upregulation, various cell repair functions, all these kind of really cool stuff. Basically just keeping you alive, keeping the body functioning and keeping you alive.
So if we come and we look at the proteins and the fats and all those kind of things,
Yeah.
um, they affect different things. Like maybe you can explain better how protein, why protein is a great thing to go and increase when you're looking to go on a diet, and then also what's the benefits and the functions of fats.
Hmm.
What role do they play? If you can maybe give us a bit more insight into that.
Yeah, I mean, I can do that briefly here, but again, if you want more in-depth detail, please go and listen to the other episodes. Yeah, where we go like really deep into these things. But the general thing is, look, protein is the building block for your body, so you need proteins in the right amounts, in the right amino acid profiles and balances for your body to be able to repair itself optimally. And a lot of that just comes down to making sure you eat, very complete protein sources. Most of them is just going to be meat based. If you want to eat plant based, there are some like soy. That's a great one. That's also a complete protein. But yeah, that's the main thing. It's purely for recovery and for raw materials for your body to rebuild itself. Fats, they are essential to your body because fats provide an environment for certain vitamins to kind of be broken down and assimilated into the body for those functions. Without enough fat, your body cannot produce a lot of its hormones. Okay, most notably, a lot of the sex hormones, right? In the male and female, if you don't have enough fat, your body's hormonal production for these areas would tend to shut down. You start to go down, and we usually see it in like people that try to do bodybuilding contest preparation, and they go like super low fat for more than 2 weeks. I mean, say super low fat, something like, you know, 20 grams of fat or even less than that. I've seen some people go even less than that for like multiple weeks where they're I not very good coaching in my opinion, but they get pushed to do that. And usually what happens is that they end up experiencing all the side effects of like, just not having enough sex hormone production, low sex drive, feeling tired all the time. Even weight loss and fat loss itself slows down even further. I know it sounds funny, right? Like you don't get enough fat, your fat loss slows down. So these are kind of, I guess, the more variable qualitative effects, if you will, of where we consider, okay, it's not just only about the calories, but it's also about the quality of the calories that you're taking in. So for the short term, if you're just looking purely to lose weight, okay, short term being maybe 3 months, let's say, for example, and you have a decent amount of weight to lose. In that short term, if you just purely count your calories, like they've done many experiments like this where they eat just McDonald's, they eat Twinkies. There was like you can go and search for it. There's many different people who
Mm.
tried this and they were on a calorie deficit. They actually not only lost weight, they actually improved their health markers. So in the short term, it can work like this. But in the long term, what's going to happen is you're going to start having a lot more um, of these micronutrient deficiencies that then start to impact the quality of like your body's recovery, your long-term recovery, your long-term body's health component of things. So for the long term, you definitely want to instill some of these quality components into the diet. um, but having said all this also, I do want to caveat that again, right now when we talk about, we're actually talking more specifically about calorie tracking, right?
Yeah.
We're talking about counting your calories and all. And calorie tracking and counting your calories is not the same as calories in, calories out. Again, we said this right at the start. Calories in, calories out is a thermodynamic law. So it's basically a sign. It's the same law as gravity. If I drop something, it's gonna fall to the ground, right?
Mm.
Yeah. So you can't change that fact. And the 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 counting of calories itself is the thing that um can help you become aware of how much you're eating, how much you actually need to take in. And it's actually a skill. And as with any skill, when people try it for the first time, I think a lot of times they kind of suck at it, right? Yeah, I mean there's a lot of apps and stuff right now that makes it easier, but even just knowing what to key in, how to look at your food, how to estimate the food, does take some effort, does take some practice at the start. But what we're talking right now about is the whole calories in, calories out. Sorry, the whole calorie tracking itself as this tool and this skill to help you better manage your weight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's not just better manage your weight, but also create a more healthy relationship with food, I find.
Yes.
Because
Yes.
there is the flip side when we talk about calorie counting.
Yeah.
And this is
For
that
sure.
people go, like you said, they go absolutely crazy and they bring the example you gave, their fat portion down to 20 grams.
Yeah.
And then other people are like, they'll bring their scales to the to the
Yeah.
restaurant. You
They
know?
bring it to the restaurant, they'll end up like weighing things out at
Yeah.
the like if you go any hot pot or something.
Mm.
Um and I admire, like, I think it gets celebrated to some degree by some people because it feels very like, oh wow, I'm so dedicated to the goal. But
Unless you're a competitive bodybuilder, I don't see why you need
yeah.
to do that.
But at the same time, also, even if you are a competitive bodybuilder, I've been giving these things some quite a lot of thought as well. Because, like, I myself right now, I'm pursuing bodybuilding,
Mm.
right? Um, but I think it can be done in a much healthier way. And of course, health to some degree can be subjective. I mean, I'm not talking about like just physical health, right? But like we talk about the mental health components, it can be quite subjective. And on that front, you need to have some level of social flexibility. I don't think it's extremely healthy to be so rigid that it impairs all these elements of your life, right? If you find that um you are always rejecting people, you're not going to go out, you're not socializing, all these things just because you're trying to keep very specific to the diet. I think if you do that for long enough, it gets very hard to be happy,
Yes.
right? To have like a kind of a fulfilling life because that social interaction component, in and of itself, is a vital part of just human health.
Mm.
um so going back to the main topic here, is like calorie counting has that flip side, like you mentioned, Mike, where potentially can make people very obsessive.
Yeah.
So I think it's very interesting when we look at it from this perspective to say, hey, maybe we need to see, is it the right thing for you to do? Because for some people it might just not be the right thing, especially if some of those people have had existing like existing eating disorder conditions before. Then trying to bring in calorie counting might trigger these uh um you know old habits again.
Mm.
um and then there's some people that maybe they have more addictive type of personalities, more obsessive type of personalities. Maybe calorie counting is not as good as well, you know. Again, all these things are so unquantifiable, to be honest. It's already qualitative, so it really happens on a case by case basis. But I think we need to acknowledge that aspect, that flip side of things. With, if you do calorie tracking, Are you just trying to meet your numbers only, or are you looking at it and keeping a more broad scope eye on the whole thing and say, okay, this is what is the purpose of it? It's just for me to make sure I understand how much I'm taking in, make sure I gain awareness of my portions. It's a learning process. Of course, this is kind of where, like, okay, you have a good coach, somebody to guide you through the process, then that can help for sure. I think you have to do it in a progressive way and in a way that allows you to build upon the skills so that you gain the awareness. And once you gain the awareness, we usually do this in the coaching as well. It's like once people reach the goal, we try to transition them out of the calorie tracking component into more what we call intuitive eating. Yeah.
So when you're looking at this calories in, calories out, right?
Yes.
Does it? And let's maybe also look towards some of the well-known eating habits. So maybe intermittent fasting.
Yes.
All right. You're looking at there's an eating period window there. How does that fall into calories in, calories out?
Oh, this really simple. Um, Basically, if you just think about it, right, intermittent fasting is just taking out one meal. Broadly, if you look at from practical application. So let's say if you're eating breakfast, lunch, dinner, and now you say I can only eat in the afternoon between 1 p.m. to 8 p.m. or 1 p.m. to 9 p.m. or 12 p.m. to 8 p.m. whatever it is, whatever the window it is. Most people then would eat lunch, right? They won't have anything in the morning. They'll eat lunch, they'll eat dinner, and assuming they eat the same regular lunch and dinner, now they've taken out breakfast. What have you done? You've just removed a certain amount of food from your daily diet. And so on the input side of things, the calories inside of things, you have just reduced that. And if you just keep everything else status quo, you go and continue to move around. You're not your step count hasn't dropped. You're still going to the gym. You're doing all these other stuff. Then your calories outside generally remains about the same. So now you've created this calorie deficit. So that's kind of how it achieves that. Okay, just because we're not actively counting calories does not mean calories don't count. I think this is something we have to always be aware because we always make this joke, right? Like on people's birthdays, on clients' birthdays and stuff. Usually we crack this joke with them and say, hey, like it's your birthday today, go and enjoy yourself. Remember, calories don't count on your birthday, or calories don't count during Christmas, or calories don't count during Chinese New Year, or whatever it
Half
is.
price.
If only it worked that way, man.
Yeah.
But it's still there. Just because we're not counting it, just because we're not aware of it, does not mean that it's not there, right? Even before Isaac Newton like came up with his theory of how gravity works, it doesn't mean that the gravity wasn't present in the natural
Mm.
world, right? Like if not, we all be floating up into space or something. It's not. It's He just brought awareness to it. So if the thing is still there, it's still happening that way, whether or not you're actually counting your calories or not. So you might as well kind of take advantage of that. Use the tool to kind of figure out how it works.
Okay. Another question I would have is that you have your daily expenditure of calories or energy, right?
Yes.
And then you also have what we call the weekly expenditure. So
Yes.
let's say that I'm working out in the gym 3 days a week
Mhm.
and I'm doing endurance 2 days a week.
Okay.
My calorie out would obviously be differing on those different days. Okay.
Yes.
So does my calories in need to change for that, or do I average it out over the 7 day period?
That's actually a really good question. I think that is a lot to do with two major factors. Actually, no, three major factors. The first one being what is the like kind of what's your level at which you are doing these activities. If you're just like a beginner just starting out, you're just slowly like lifting in the gym, still learning the ropes, you just started doing a bit of running, a bit more endurance stuff, I would say it doesn't matter, as much. If you were like high level hybrid style athlete, or had a very specific goal of like I want to run this marathon but also lift a certain amount of weight or something, then it probably matters like how much you eat on each day, where the nutritional component becomes a lot more has to be a lot more precise, right, to support those goals. So it's a sliding scale
Mm.
in the first place. The other factor I would say is, and it's kind of related to the first one, is the what do you call it? The extent to which you're doing the activity, sorry, the intensity of the activity, right, and the volume of the activity you're doing. Somebody who is a lot stronger is going to be able to do a lot more in a session than somebody who is not. Okay, and somebody who's a lot fitter is going to be able to clock a lot more miles than somebody who's not, and that will impact the need for differing levels of nutrition. Just because if you can do more, you're going to impact your body more. So your body might need varying levels a lot more, right? It becomes a bit more of a present variable. And the last one I would say is just how complicated, it is to kind of stick to for you. If it's something that you already have a seasoned approach to, meaning your skill at tracking your calories, your skill at eating and managing your nutrition is quite high, then I would say like this would be really easy for you to do because you'll be a bit more intuitive with it. Okay, on days where I do my endurance stuff, I probably need to eat a little bit more. On days where I do my weight training stuff, I can get away with eating a bit less, and then my overall net will be within my goals. Within my target goals. So I think it comes down to those three things really. Um, but if we look at it broadly, uh, across the week, generally we look at an average. We look at an average and we say, okay, are you hitting this target average that is specific to your goal? If you're trying to lose weight, because most people that are listening to this want to lose some sort of fat, lose some sort of weight. So you probably will be targeting that average calorie to be below what your current maintenance might be.
Right. So shall we say the general conception is that when you want to do, you go 500 under. You want to put on weight or build muscle, you go 500 over, right?
That's
But is
the
this very dependent on the person? Because like, let's say my calorie intake is only 1,700.
yes.
Then I want to take 500 of that. I'm going to eat 1,200 calories.
Yes. So this 500 plus and 500 minus, I think comes from the idea that a pound of body fat is 3,005. But that's actually quite a gross estimate, quite a gross simplification of things. And it's not quite one-to-one linear in that sense. Again, also this comes down to differing people's uh what we call like the metabolic flexibility, the rate at which it adapts, it changes, things like this. But I think the most important thing for you to understand is that differing people will need differing levels of change. And so let me give you an example then. It doesn't have to be plus minus 500. It can be, let's say if you want to lose some weight, it can be something as simple as using a percentage of a deficit. And I find that for most people, this actually seems to work a little bit better to try to achieve, let's say, a certain rate of loss that we want. How much weight we are looking to lose per week, averaged out over a month, over however long. So percentage will probably be better. Maybe start with like a 10% deficit, you know. So if you're eating 2,000, what was it, 1,007?
Let's call it 2,000.
Or let's go 2,000,
Easy
easier,
math.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So easy math. So instead of 2,000, you're eating 1,008. Okay. So try eating 1,008 for a while and see if your weight's going down. If it's not going down as fast as you like, probably take another 5% off that. So take another 100 calories off. Then you go to 1,007. So you can really play this progressive game. Where I think most people fail on doing it on their own is actually sustainably just like or just consistently tracking and making sure that they're actually sticking to it. Having the consistency and the level of confidence that they're actually sticking to that amount. Yeah. But yeah, you don't have to do it so aggressively, and you can do it quite progressively. 10% down first would be a great starting point. If you have a lot of weight to lose, honestly, you probably can go a bit more aggressive. Something like even 20% down is probably great. And it's probably tolerable. Okay. You might feel a bit of hunger in the beginning, but it will quickly subside. Your body will get used to it. You'll be fine. Basically, you'll be fine. You won't die. Um, and then for the gaining part, I think this one is quite interesting because there's been new research on that where people always say like, you got to add at 500. Uh, I think what they've seen in the research is actually that a more gentle surplus actually works better because that extra surplus doesn't necessarily translate into all muscle gain.
Yeah.
And you might end up just gaining a lot more fat than you need to. However, there's also been people that try to do like the whole lean gaining thing, or main gaining. I think that's what they call it, main gaining, which is basically they try to eat around their maintenance and hopefully gain some muscle, which is also not very realistic because you do need like the extra tissue to come from somewhere. You need the materials to come in, right? To
Yeah.
come from somewhere. And if your body's if you're only eating at maintenance, your body's already using whatever it needs to sustain and maintain where it's at. You don't have extra materials to build. So you do need some sort of surplus, but does the surplus need to be like super intense at 500 cals? I've seen some people do like dirty bulking kind of thing, right? Like 1,000 cals extra. Look like maybe you can get away with that if you're a pure beginner and you're training like crazy intensely hard and you're maybe going through puberty. I don't know. Like you're young.
Mm.
You probably can get away with that because there's this confluence of factors that can allow you to get away with that. But look, everybody that's listening to this is slightly over 40, or you're at least approaching 40 like I am, and we have to take a bit more of an informed approach to it. And the informed approach just says, hey, 200 calories, 250, 300 calories maybe maximum is probably where you want to be at. Yeah, and this is more true the more advanced you get. So if you're a beginner, you could try 500 first. If you find you're gaining your weight a bit too fast, you're gaining fat, you're getting too pudgy around the waist too quickly, dial it back down. Dial it back down. Yeah.
So that was one question that I would just want to probably end this particular segment on, is that is it any different when you're looking at the calorie surplus, calorie deficit for people over 40 compared to
Mm.
younger people?
Yeah, I would say that the body is not as robust once we hit like 40 plus. And so we need to be a little bit more gentle with some of these changes. Because sometimes the aggressive changes, like, for example, like you talk about the surplus. I think like for example, we use the surplus and gaining weight as an example. If you go too aggressively, you end up just putting a lot more fat.
Yeah.
Um, because yeah, and of course this also depends on your training and how hard you're training and all, but you also have to factor in the fact that once we hit 40, sometimes the hormonal balances do start to change slightly. So for guys, 40 plus is when your testosterone starts to drop off. If you had a very terrible kind of lifestyle, you're not sleeping enough, and you drink a lot of alcohol and all these kind of like so-called really bad, nasty lifestyle habits, then probably your testosterone levels would have been dropping off even earlier than that. So these things do affect your body's ability to change itself, right? To
Mm.
change its tissue composition. And in the case of building muscle, it's something that's really challenging for the body to do in the first place, right? And so um, at 40, it's not really something that it will prioritize, and it gets a lot harder to do. So you want to try to give your body the best chance at that, and being a bit more gentle with some of these changes can be useful. If you're talking about fat loss, I think the body's a little bit more forgiving in that, and it's not so much about the age as it is about the current state of your body, of which the age affects that to some degree. But let's say if you have a ton of excess fat, your waist height ratio is like 0.6 or something. For those who are not familiar, waist height ratio is you take your waist circumference divided by your height. And so if you're anything beyond 0.5, it means that you've got a like really big belly that you need to lose. And so that just indicates that you probably have not just a lot of fat, but perhaps a lot of visceral fat. We did an episode on that as well.
Yes, we
Yeah,
did.
that just reminded me. And you need to lose that fat. And so you can, and the cool part about it is that you can actually lose fat pretty aggressively without any negative health outcomes. In fact, the losing of the fat oftentimes brings about a net positive health outcome. And that goes back to what I mentioned just now, where you say short term, if you just follow purely calorie deficit, you eat Twinkies, you eat McDonald's, whatever you eat, as long as you're eating within that calorie range that will bring you into a deficit, you will lose weight and you will have that net health impact, the improvement. But once you reach a certain weight, a certain healthier weight range already, okay, then the quality of all these things start to really take effect and they start to take root. And that's where you see where your shortcomings are. It starts to get revealed. You can't obviously eat like that forever with McDonald's and all because you just don't get the same level of nutrients coming in. Yeah. So it's always an evolving thing. So I think maybe a lot of times we look at one method and we say, hey, can I do this thing like forever? And the truth is, as you change, as you develop, as you evolve in your own weight loss journey, you are going to need differing tools. So a tool that you might encounter right now might not be the tool for you at this stage. You just have to figure out like where you are in that stage and then figure out what you actually need to focus on, right? So again, using the same example, if you have a lot of excess fat, focus on weight loss first, focus on getting some of the fat off, and then you can focus on other things. Do you graduate up to the next thing to focus on, and then so on and so forth. And that's why it is a journey.
Okay. if we have to jump in and say, it's like, if you have to give your top three practical tips
Hmm.
in point form
Point form. Okay.
to somebody who's looking to create a sustainable calorie deficit, what would those top three practical tips be in bullet points?
Bullet points. I think we just talked about that, which is first one is progressive change. Don't try to change things too quickly or too drastically. Focus on like one or two changes that are significant. So example, replacing two of your meals, the carbs in two of your meals with veg, for example. That would be a very relatively simple and easy thing to do that can have a really huge impact because it's going to reduce your calorie count quite a bit. It's also going to bump up your micronutrient intake quite a bit. It's also going to bump up your fiber intake quite a bit. So now you're ticking off many boxes with just one simple action. So that's the first thing. The second thing would be practically you want to try to get in a moderate amount of activity. I do think most people nowadays, especially if you're listening to this, chances are you are probably quite sedentary. So getting a decent amount of activity can really help on the output side of the equation. And the standard everybody talks about is like 10,000 steps, right? But the truth is, it's really a range as always. So 5 to 10,000 steps. If you're not at 5,000 steps, you probably want to get to 5,000 steps as quickly as possible. Anything below 5,000 tends to show a lot more what we call like all-cause mortality risk, which means basically you don't walk enough, you're not active enough, you die faster, right? Or you're at risk of dying earlier. So 5,000 is probably the bottom end of where you want to be. Try to go past that, all the way up until about 10,000. If you can do more than 10,000, yeah, you probably will still get some benefits. It starts to diminish quite rapidly after that. So you don't really need to do too much more than 10,000. But I think for practically for many people also, given the schedules that they have, 10,000 is also already a bit of a stretch.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then the last one is, and I think we'll do a topic on this in the future episodes, which is uh, analyze your environment and pick out where you have certain habits and certain things that you can change in your environment that will make it easier for you to uh do what you want to do, like get the habits that you actually want to get. So for example, let's say if you noticed in your routines and your environment that you always sit down and watch Netflix after your shows, sorry, after your dinner.
Yeah.
Maybe if you're trying to get in more steps, you're trying to be a bit healthier, maybe you can say, hey, instead of just sitting down and watching Netflix, maybe I might go out for a walk with my partner. So that's an example of like, just changing that habit routine a little bit. Um,
Have you been watching me from okay, okay, I'll start walking.
I have a secret camera installed, you know, and then in your house, Mike. But yeah, there's things like this, or even like a more an alternative to that would be like, hey, if you wanna watch Netflix after dinner, maybe you get yourself like a walking pad or something, a small little treadmill, put it at home, and you just walk on that while you're watching a show after dinner. Small things like this. I think analyzing your lifestyle and figuring out what you are willing to change or what you can change, really, really is an underrated thing that many people don't do, because many people just say, I want to lose weight,
Yeah.
and it's so vague, and it's like, okay, so what are you going to do? I'm going to exercise more. Okay, what does that look like? You're not specific enough. So get specific and analyze your environment and say, what can I change? And what I'm willing to change. Yeah.
Okay. I think for me is I would add in the one more element, and it's probably not so much to do with calories in, calories out,
Yep.
food side, but I would add in the element of strength training,
Mm.
especially for people over 40. The benefits
Yeah.
far outweigh the negatives when it
Yeah.
comes to strength training. So I would
100%.
say is yes, the mobility, the movement is fantastic. Start with that, but progress towards strength training.
Yep. 100%. 100%.
I think we've covered pretty much everything. Do you have anything else you would like to add?
No, I think that pretty much covers it. As always, if people have questions, just leave them in
Mm,
the show notes, right? The show comments. I believe you can leave them in the show comments.
yeah.
Uh,
So I think we can always close it off as well is like calories in, calories out is a foundational principle,
It is.
but it's not the whole story. Like we discussed, focusing on healthy eating patterns, creating a sustainable approach, and all of these rather than just purely the calorie amounts, right?
Yeah.
We want you to create a healthy relationship with food, and see the gains and the goals achieved that you set out for yourself, but with the main focus being that healthy relationship with food.
Yeah.
And so, in closing, I mean, you guys can always head over to our website at 40plusfit.com, to learn some more on what we have to say here. And you can follow us and also share this episode with your friends and family. And from my side, I said thanks for listening, and remember to keep moving.